Hi everyone, so welcome back to a new video. So this video is going to be all about pricing. So when we first started reselling, we used to pretty much not guess prices, but yeah, a lot of it was we were using a lot of very, I would say, guesstimates is what we were using. So today I wanted to talk about a new pricing formula that we're actually going to be using from now on, and just sort of talking you through how we came up with it, why we're using it, and all that kind of stuff. And hopefully that'll help if you are maybe finding it a little bit tricky to price items that you're looking to resell as well. So this is a system that we're going to be using to price every single one of our items, and it just makes sure that we are not sitting on stock for months on end and it just sitting there gathering dust, and it's also making sure that we're not undercharging for our items as well. So the reason that we kind of decided that we wanted to try and figure out a little bit of a pricing formula is I felt like we were being a bit inconsistent when it came to pricing things. So there was a few times that I felt like we definitely undercharged for items, like items that were maybe a little bit more desirable or a little bit more special and unique than maybe what we initially thought, even after our research and things, because they got snapped up really quick. So definitely don't want to do that, because it means that you're just losing money. And then I'm always one of those people who worries about overcharging. I feel like now, especially when people are so, cautious maybe about what they're spending, they do look a little bit more at what things are priced at and if they think they're priced fairly. So it's just about getting the balance right, and I feel like it's very tricky. It's a really tricky thing to do, and we definitely have been guilty of both underpricing things and overpricing things, and we constantly adapt our prices to try and get the best balance. Another thing that we found as well is that obviously if we weren't sure, or if we weren't being very consistent with how we price things, it was making it hard when we were buying things as well to sell, because you've not got that kind of consistent way that you're going to price something. So then sometimes you're buying something and you're not 100% sure what your actual profit is going to be, which obviously that's not ideal. So some of the things that we have to consider when we are pricing things is a few different, I suppose, pillars I would say that we need to think about. Is obviously the cost price. So that's something you have to take into account, obviously, so that's how much it's going to cost you. And then other costs associated with selling your item, so things like platform fees, potentially delivery, all that kind of stuff. So these are all the things that we need to consider when you're pricing your item. You need to obviously include that in the price, or at least, offset it a little bit. Then other things we need to think about as well is how unique the item is, how in demand it is as well. So something might be really unique, really rare, which is obviously going to drive the price up potentially. Same if it's in demand, it's maybe going to drive the price up, and as well the condition. So that's something else that we obviously have to think about. Is it in good condition? Is it satisfactory? So all these little things put together are going to affect how you price an item. And then something else which we do like to consider, but definitely do not base your pricing fully on this, is what other people are selling it for. So obviously you don't want to then go in and price way above them, because you're probably not going to sell your item. But then you also don't want to go in and totally, really crazily undercut them, because one, you might risk not making any money. Two, it's got a risk of driving, driving the sort of going price for those items down. And you kind of have to be, I suppose, a bit considerate of other resellers and things like that. So it's not about making sure that you're always going to be selling, the cheapest item or the cheapest version of it or whatever, but it's about pricing fairly and making sure that you're being consistent as well. Because another thing that you could run the risk of is if people look at it and you've priced it really, really low, they can immediately think it's fake, or they can immediately think there's something wrong with it, and they don't even come and look at it. So you've got to, again, just get that balance right. So after we kind of had a little chat about obviously needing to come up with some sort of formula for pricing things, just to make it a bit easier, and this is not like something that is set in stone, obviously different things will affect it, and I do feel like once you do resell a few things and you've been doing it for a little while, you have a bit of a gut feeling as well, so obviously don't ignore that. But what I did is I actually asked ChatGPT to come up with a pricing strategy. So I kind of put in, the cost price, the brands that we were selling, and the condition, the types of items, all that kind of stuff. And ChatGPT was able to tell me what kind of formula to kind of base a price off of. And then I actually asked it to put it into a Excel sheet, so that I could just then input my numbers, like the cost price numbers, pick the sort of different type of item, pick the brand, all that kind of stuff. So then it actually calculated it for me. And yeah, I'll walk you through, show you what we've done, and just kind of show you what, a few examples and things like that. And that is definitely what we're going to probably be basing a lot of our prices off of in the future. So the first step that we kind of have to think about, and this is the first step in the Excel spreadsheet, which I will walk you through an example in a little second, is obviously we need to look at what our item actually is. So is it a purse, is it a bag, and then what brand it is. And then what my spreadsheet actually does is it takes the cost price and then you multiply it. So depending on what the brand is, depending on what the item is, depending on if it's vintage and things like that, you might want to multiply it twice. It might get multiplied 3.5 times, 4 times, 5 times, totally depending on, what type of brand it is and things like that. And then that is kind of like your jumping off point, and then you make little adjustments after that. So before going ahead and making the little adjustments later on, you also need to subtract things like maybe platform fees, postage, if you're the one that's paying for postage, any other fees that are associated with selling your item, you obviously need to take that off as well, because that is obviously a cost to you as well as the actual cost price of the item. So those need to be taken into account as well. After that, you're going to make little adjustments. So in the spreadsheet that I'm going to show you, there's going to be just little adjustments depending on the condition. So if it's excellent condition, you might want to add a certain amount of money. If it's not great condition, there's a little bit of damage or a little bit of wear, you might want to take a little bit of obviously money off the price. Same when it comes to demand. If the item is in really high demand and it's really rare, you might want to add a little bit to the price. But just the same as if it's quite common, if it's not really rare, you might just want to leave it as it is. Or I don't think you'd really deduct anything, but maybe just not add anything. So once you've done all that, you've got your price that you're potentially going to sell it at. That is kind of where you would look at it yourself and think, right, does that look right? This is where your kind of gut check, as I would say, would come in. Like, does this look right? Check other platforms, check other places that are selling this item and think, right, does that kind of stand out? Is it too cheap? Is it too expensive? Would I buy it at that price? Just kind of obviously give yourself a little bit of a reality check. If you think, yeah, that's actually sitting, pretty in line with everything, great. Obviously, if not, it might be something that you might have to go back and, look at it, give it a little bit of a tweak. So I'm just going to flip you around just now and show you the spreadsheet that I put together. Now, the original spreadsheet that ChatGPT gave me was actually quite basic, so I've added quite a lot of different things to it just to make it that little bit better. These are all just little examples of different brands and things like that. There is a couple of items within it that are ones that we've already sold. I just kind of wanted to see, obviously what the final price, that I suppose the spreadsheet was coming up with. And yes, I'll just flip you around and just show you an example just now. I have our spreadsheet here. So down the side here in column A, we've got the item ID. So I've just basically put in the name of the item, just so that I know what it is I'm talking about. Then in column B, as we can see here, we've actually got a little drop down menu, and you can actually choose the brand. So what we'll do is I'll just kind of let's just put in a total example, a Louis Vuitton wallet, okay? So Louis Vuitton wallet, I bet you I don't have Louis Vuitton here. No, I don't. So let's just try a different brand. Let's do, for example, a Chanel wallet, okay? So what you do is you pick your brand, Chanel. So in the column C there, it tells you what tier it is. So depending on what type of brand it is, it could be a different tier. So we've got things like luxury, which is tier 1, ultra luxury, tier 0, heritage, and then contemporary. And obviously the lower number the tier, the more kind of expensive it is. So in column D, this is where we put our cost price. So just say, for example, our Chanel wallet cost us £20, okay? So in column E, this tells us your multiplier. So if you have a brand like Chanel, the multiplier with it being ultra luxury, you're going to 7 times it. You're going to multiply it by 7 times. Obviously, we can see up here above there are other examples. So for example, brand Furla, which obviously is a contemporary tier 3 brand, not as obviously a luxury Chanel. You'd multiply your cost price by 4. Other examples like Gucci, maybe multiply it by 5.5 times. So Chanel, we're multiplying it by 7 times. So if we go along to column F, we can see that our base price that we're kind of starting off with is £140. Then for column G, we go into our condition adjustment. So this is where if it's in very good condition, you maybe add a little bit. If it's excellent, like new, so we've got here add in 15. If it's fair, so if it's got a little bit of damage, you'd actually take away 5. So let's just keep it at good, which I'm pretty sure is just 0. Yep. And then in column H, you can see there what is either added to the price or taken away. Then we've got the style and demand part. Now, I've actually not added the drop-down box here, but the same kind of thing would go here. You would have your different options for if it's in demand or if it's not. And then you would either add a little bit of an amount on if it's something that's really in demand, or I'd probably just keep it at 0 if it's something that's not really in demand. Then if we go along to J, this is where you would put in your platform fees. You can see at the top there. So again, I've not filled this part in. So you would probably put in, the cost of your platform fees, whether it's you're selling it on Vinted, eBay, wherever. You'd put that in and make sure and subtract that from the amount that you've got for the price. Target profit, £120. Obviously, that's taken off your cost price. So for this example, the final list price would be £140 because I haven't actually made that many adjustments to it. So the part of this spreadsheet that I found particularly useful was column E here, the brand multiplier. So all these figures like 4.5 times, 5.5 times, 6 times, that's obviously how much you're multiplying your cost price by. That was the bit that I wasn't sure about, because obviously different brands are different levels of luxury, I suppose. So something like Chanel is obviously, it says here you're going to multiply it 7 times, and this is coming from ChatGPT. Again, it's not set in stone. You don't feel like you need to obviously copy this exactly. Phone gone off. So, and then obviously you've got other brands like Furla, which are a nice brand, but they're a contemporary brand. They're not like super ultra luxury. So, and obviously you're only going to multiply that 4 times. So I just found that really useful, that part. And then, as I said, you don't need to use all the different columns here. Like, I've not actually used the sort of style and demand bit yet, or even really thought about the target profit or anything like that. I just wanted to use the brand multiplier part, so I had a kind of base price and then adjust it for the condition, if it's in good condition or fair condition or whatever. So definitely going to be using this from now on when we do price things, and probably I'm going to go back and have a look at things that we've already got up and see if we need to adjust any prices. So I hope that example was clear and at least a little bit useful. If you do have any questions about anything that I've shown, please just comment below, ask away. This is something that is very much a work in progress. As I say, there's bits of the spreadsheet that I don't know if I'm actually going to use, but definitely found parts of it really, really useful. And it was something that initially came from ChatGPT, but then I adapted it a little bit to tweak it to more what I was actually, wanting to use. So, I do think as well, you could probably use this for a lot of different areas, not just, fashion and things. Basically, you're going to be putting in just different brands or different items, and you can easily do the research and find out what you're going to be multiplying your cost price by to get a kind of base price. So definitely a really good method of pricing, especially if you're quite new to the reselling business like us and you're still questioning your pricing a little bit. So I do feel like having a very clear pricing strategy has great benefits for our business. So a couple of things that I think it will really make things easier is knowing what stuff to buy. So there's certain things that we've bought in the past, which I'm pretty sure we're going to mention in other upcoming videos, that we probably should have walked away from because the profit margin isn't there, or the demand isn't there, or the condition, whatever. So I do feel like having a clear pricing strategy, it's almost like you can quickly do it in your head, and you can be like, right, okay, that's not worth buying, or that is worth buying. So it'll make things a lot easier when we're coming to thinking about making buying decisions. And also I do feel like sometimes it's quite tricky when you're pricing something that you really like. So if you personally really like it, you are got a bit of an emotional attachment to some items, so you price them high, or you keep the prices high when you should be reducing it. So I do think having a clear strategy will help, you know, stop that from happening as well. I also think as well that one of the main aims that I was wanting to have for our reselling business is having a bit of a quicker turnover. So I feel like obviously there are some items that are a bit pricier, you are going to expect them to sit for a bit longer because they're a bigger pricing decision. That's totally fine. However, there are things that were sitting that I was thinking, gosh, these should be moving a bit quicker. Like surely, like we want to be getting stock moving, we want things to be, you know, moving quicker, higher stock turnover, all that. So I do feel like having a clear pricing strategy is going to help with that as well, because it kind of takes the guesswork out. It means that you're kind of going in at the right price already. There's not going to be any like pricing it too high, having to reduce it, having to wait, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I really think that's going to help with having a bit of a higher stock turnover as well, which obviously is great. And obviously it's going to help us have a bit of a consistent profit as well. So I feel like some of the things that we've sold recently, we maybe have managed to price them at a sort of slightly, I'm not saying higher price that it's been unfair, but a price of what we're, you know, that's more around about what we really would ideally like to get for an item. And obviously it's sat for a little bit, but it has sold. It's obviously sold to the right customer, you know, really happy. However, those kind of sales are very patchy. They're not consistent. They're, you know, you might have to wait a couple of months to sell an item like that. And it's almost like you're trying to weigh up, would you rather have that kind of business where you're kind of waiting on the big sales, or would you rather price things maybe a little bit lower, but you're getting consistent sales and you're getting consistent income? And I think that is kind of what we're more aiming at. And I do feel like having a pricing strategy really does help with the consistency. And then obviously having a good pricing strategy is going to stop us making some of the mistakes that we've made in our first year of reselling. So we've definitely made some mistakes with pricing things such as underpricing stuff, not really knowing what it's worth, to try and get things to move a little bit quicker. We've kind of almost went the other way and underpriced things, maybe copying other people, like, or being influenced by other people that are selling similar items, and obviously trying to either compete with them or try and sell things, you know, a little bit cheaper so that people buy from us instead. So those are some mistakes that we kind of want to try and avoid in the future. Yeah, so I feel like having a good pricing strategy, it's also really good at building quite a lot of trust with your buyer as well, because they know what to expect from you. And I just don't want us to fall into that trap of, like, you know, pricing something and then if it's not selling right away, discounting it, and then discounting it more and more and more and more, so then you end up hardly making anything just because you're wanting to shift things. So yeah, we definitely don't want to be doing that. We haven't done that, but I don't want to fall into that trap. And then it just means then that's then what people expect to pay for things, because then it just ends up driving the prices down for everybody, which isn't great. So I'm curious to know if you are a fellow reseller, or even if you're reselling but in a completely different niche, how do you price your items? Do you have a pricing formula, or have you put together a bit of a pricing formula, or do you price totally on instinct? So yeah, comment below, let me know what you do, because I just find it really interesting knowing how other people approach quite tricky subjects, especially when it comes to reselling and to running your own business. So if you found this video useful or interesting, make sure and subscribe and click on the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos, and I will see you in our next one. Bye!